Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for our Intro to WellDatabase webinar. My name is John Farrell. I'm the CEO and co-founder of WellDatabase, and I appreciate you taking your time to learn a little bit more about our product. Today we're going to touch on all of the basics from filtering, working with our map, working with analytics, and exporting data. We'll kind of touch on high points on each one of them to give you just a taste of everything. And if you ever need more detail, you can dive into our videos on our YouTube channel or check out our blogs and knowledge base. Before we get started, I would like to kind of take a second to talk a little bit about the data because those questions come up a lot. First, our data is all publicly available data. We don't carry any proprietary data, and that's because we have terms that we want to pass on to you, the user, and if we don't own the data, if it's not in the public space, then we cannot pass on the terms to you that we want to. So those sources will be regulatory agencies, USGS, Frac Focus, university systems in various states will have some of that data. And then from a frequency standpoint, which is another common question, we get permits and completions really on a nightly basis almost across the board with a very, very few exceptions. And then production data is typically a monthly thing that gets reported. Another question that we get a lot about production data is that when we receive production data, it is typically about 2 months behind from when it was actually produced. And that time period is given for operators to file their production with the state and then time to make the production available from the state. And so those are just a couple of the common questions that we get around the data. If you have any more questions about those types of data items, you can check out our website where we give you a list of their coverage as well as our sources. And then you can always hit us on any questions you need in our chat. For this webinar, we will have a live chat where you can ask any questions and a member of our team will be on to answer it. If for any reason we don't get to your question, then by all means follow up with us again through our website, or you can always email us sales@welldatabase.com and someone will get to you and make sure you're taken care of. So without further ado, we're going to hop right in. The first thing is to kind of get the lay of the land. As you can see, our map is here to the left. Our analytics are over here to the right. And up top, you can toggle your three main views, map, analytics, and list. Toggling the list will just turn on the well list, which will have some important features where you can show things like headers, casing, completion data. This is also where you can export and add wells to projects. Those are two things that we will step through here in a minute. For now, I'm going to go ahead and hide the list. This is our default view, and it's that way because the map will interact with the analytics, and that'll become very easy to see as we start diving in and using the application. Over to the left, we have our filter pane. Starting from the top, you can save filters and recall those filters, and so you can create sets of searches that matter to you and pop those in and out as needed. And then you can share searches as well. This is a kind of a neat feature because it will generate a link that you can send to anybody. And if they have a WellDatabase account, then obviously it'll open up in WellDatabase and they'll be able to use it. But even if they don't have a WellDatabase account, they'll be able to look at a kind of read-only view of your search. So again, just kind of a nice way to share information that you might be looking at. Up at the top, you'll see that you have an all toggle, which is the default, which means we're looking at all filters. If I click the applied, it'll show me only the filters that are applied at any given time. And this is a super useful tool because there are a ton of filters, and sometimes as you're using it, you might not be getting the results you expect, and coming here and to double check which filters you have applied would be very useful. The other thing is the search option here, and this is an interesting one because we do again have so many filters that it might be beneficial to come in here and say, well, I want to look at frac filters. So here we go, some proppant mass, frac company, or go ahead and click, say, the ingredients, and we can look at those. So if you have something you're looking for, this is the easiest way to find it. What we find most users kind of settle in on a handful of filters that they really live in and day out. And so that's just to kind of get started, a nice way to do that. Moving down the filter list, you'll see our data sources set to public. if I drop that down, you'll see I'll be able to select any of my projects as my data source. So what that means is projects are groupings of wells and searches that you can pull together and create a project, invite other users and collaborate with it. So it's a really great tool for a number of reasons. But one of the neat things you can do is that if you create a project, then you can select it as your data source, and then everything you do will be confined to the wells that belong to that project. And so it could be useful for anything as setting up basin-wide projects or creating like small areas for evaluation on an A&D kind of deal. For this demo, we'll stick in the public side. That's where most things will live and breathe. And then kind of moving down, you'll see we have depths, API numbers. You can type one in or drop a list of API numbers in here. You'll see here, I want to take a minute to note that several of our fields have an aliased and a reported option. This is because the reported will be the raw data as reported from the state agency with all of its typos and misspellings and everything. And our aliases are a cleansed version of those. And so we try to take out all of those typical mishaps to make your life easier. But we do, for transparency reasons, allow you to search both. You never know when it might come in handy. And so you see we have that for a number of fields. Moving down in the geographic, one thing to note is the area of interest by default is the map bounds. That means whatever I'm seeing on my map is effectively working as a filter on my analytics and on my list for export purposes. So it's really great from an interaction standpoint. There are a couple cases where you might want to remove this. The most common one being, say, you're looking for a specific land grid, which is directly beneath the land grid search here. And so you might have a section township range where you expect to find 15 wells. You do it and you find out that there's only 12 wells in here. Well, it turns out that perhaps 3 of those wells don't have location data. And by not having location data, we inherently can't visualize them on the map, and so they are automatically filtered out. That's one use case. And if you do need to turn it off, you just click area of interest, click none, and you're good to go. Choosing custom here will actually allow you to draw an area of interest on the map. You can do circles, squares, or polygons and those kind of things. I'll actually hit that again later probably. So let me hide that away and keep moving down a little bit. You can search by geographic bounds of plays and basins and counties and things like that. If you're actually more interested in searching at the formation level, then producing formations is what you want. Again, the plays and basins will be a geographical boundary where we take a map bounds and draw the line and say this is the Eagleford play. But the formations will be potentially an Austin Chalk or an Eagleford within that bounds. And so the formations under the production section is typically where most users want to live whenever you're looking for wells producing out of a particular formation. Moving down, CUME information, CUME production numbers. We have first so many months production, so you can do a first 3, 6, 12, 24, 36, or 60 month production. So trying to find those windows where you're looking for like production. And the same thing on the last. You can do the last month, the last 6 months, or the last 12 months. Again, use case being maybe looking for potential injection wells, conversions to injections possible, or stripper wells that maybe need to be put in there. So that's a good search for that. Beneath there, we have production dates, and so this we're going to look for dates in which production it occurs in any of those time frames, and so that's useful if, say, you want to know when any wells that we're producing in the year 2022, that'll do that, as opposed to using like the event dates with the first prod or last prod, because the first prod might be earlier and it might have stopped, or there might be gaps. And so if a well was shut in for all of 2022, your first prod and last prod won't do you any good. You really want to use this any production between. So a little bit of a nuanced search there, but still an option that's there for you, which takes us into event dates. And you'll notice that we have first and last on just about everything. The reason is first permit a lot of times is going to be your new drills, but then last permits can be a lot of different things. It can be re-entries, recompletions, field transfers, conversions of well types, and there's a number of reasons a permit can be applied to an existing well. And so depending on your goal, you might want to search first permit or last permit date. Same thing on rigs, completions, and production dates. The frac focus data is in our system as well. And so searching by proppant numbers, chemical providers, trade names, cast numbers, we've got it all nice and cleansed so that you have some really good results from searching through that data. And then the last piece down at the bottom is this available data section where you can check these boxes to give you kind of quick, show me only wells that have production, or show me wells that have logs, or where the current rigs are, and that kind of thing. You'll notice right beneath there, I have a custom data section. You can create your own custom data fields and populate them, and then you can use them to filter out wells. And so you might see this is complete made up stuff, but I have completion type of plug and perf and sliding sleeve, and I've assigned them to a number of wells, and so I can use those to filter those. I'll show you those as we fly through some of the well details, how you do that, but it's very specific, and I don't want to dive into too many details in this webinar alone. I'm going to go ahead and hide the filters panel here. And if you recall, we talked about the map bounds is the primary, is my current filter here. So to get started, all I really need to do is zoom in. And so if I zoom into an area down in South Texas, I'll see I have 10,760 wells now in my view, and it looks like I went a little far north. And so as I pan and move, you'll see these numbers update, and it'll help you kind of get a bearing of where you're at and allow you to see the wells really quickly that way. And so that's the greatest thing about getting started in WellDatabase is all you got to do is zoom in and start seeing what you see. This takes us really nicely into our mapping tool side. So if I pull out the map tools, we'll run down these options. Up top, we have the print where you can print your maps up to 42 inches. You can show your current location. So should you be working in the field and you want to zoom in where you are, you can just enable that GPS in your browser and it'll come up. You can put a marker, so you put a lat long in there and it'll drop a pin. So it's really beneficial if you have a few reference points you want to make. You can drop as many pins as you want on that and find wells surrounding those. And then also you have an animate data. It's kind of a unique feature that we won't dive too much into, but what you can do is you set a start and end date and the period that you want to animate over, and it'll essentially cycle over the periods in that from that start to end, showing you the well spots as they come online. The kind of key idea was show me, permit activity over time, and what you'll find if you use it without some very tight parameters, it's really random. And so there's some very unique use cases that you can utilize on those, but that's what that does if you want to experiment with that some. Moving down on things like the map settings here, the base map, we have terrain by default. These are Esri layers, so you can do satellite, road map, hybrid, light and dark mode, or turn off your base map, which is actually especially useful if you start adding more and more overlays. The map can get really, really busy, and all these roads, rivers, county lines, and all these things in the background can just muddy it up. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. You can turn off the base map if you want. Tooltip on hover means right now if I click on wells, it will show me the detail. And I'll click on one just to show you what I mean. And so that's the way I tend to use it. If you like it to just do, it'll show you that tooltip when you hover over the wells by checking this box. I'm not going to do that here because it's not a way I really like to work on it. Working my way down our layer section, I'm going to actually skip over that because that's a little bit more of an involved discussion there. Coming down though into well layer settings, this is going to be about my main layer and what I'm showing. Right now I'm showing well spots, which is pretty obvious, but I can show symbols, which would give you your green dot for oil, your red gear for gas, your blue arrow line for injection wells and things like that. So if you want that kind of traditional icons, you can use well symbols. We default to well spots because we find it's where most people like to live. Well spots means that you can choose a color by, a shape by, and a size by option, and it'll all affect your spots. So right now we're well type. If I want to go to current operator, you'll see our map will update and we're colored by the current operator that we have. Now, keeping going down, you can also do bubble maps, heat maps, grid maps, and Coropleths. All of those will allow you to specify a property, and it'll color it based upon the property that you select. And so if you want to do a cumulative heat map, you can do that. If a cumulative production heat map, if you want to do a grid map based off of lateral lengths, you could do that. So you get the idea. A numeric property you specify, and heat maps will just create a heat bubble, will create a size. The grid will grid up based off of the size you select, and a choropleth will work either at a state or a county level. We will play with each and every one of those here in a minute. Going down here, though, we have the ability to really customize our map, and this is another area that seems like there's a lot going on here, but in reality, most of our users kind of set it up the way they want, and it sticks that way. And so just to go over those options, for surface hole, you can choose to show or hide it, to colorize it using this color by field, and to dynamic size it using the size by. Now, we turn that off by default because dynamically sizing the surface hole and the bottom hole together, it makes the map a little bit muddier. And so the default setup is to allow you to have a little bit of a cleaner look, but again, it all depends on what you're after. And then surface holes, if you want to specify a size, if you don't have a dynamic size, and you can set a static size to it, and then the minimum zoom level that it shows up. Now these zoom levels seem a little bit arbitrary, but basically slide it down lower if you want to see the spots at a higher level, and then slide it higher if you want to have to zoom in further. Again, standard options are really useful here. Same options are here on the bottom hole. Again, show, colorize, dynamic size, and what size you're looking for. The bottom hole, because it's the primary way people like to see the data in our platform, it doesn't have a zoom level. It's kind of the default that we show. Now, laterals have some of the same information with the show, colorize, dynamic size, and minimum zoom. And I know a lot of people will hide the bottom and surface hole and just show the laterals or those kind of things. And you can dynamic size these. It will make your lateral thinner or thicker based upon your property on your size by here. And then the last thing is labels. You can show and hide labels, minimum zooms, and you can pick the fields that you want to show for your labels. One cool thing is you can actually select multiple items here, and it'll show each of them. And you can position them above, below, left, right, or in the lateral, which tends to be the most common these days whenever you're specifically looking for unconventionals. And then font size, just to kind of make it bigger or smaller. So again, lots here, but so many times you kind of just set it the way you want, you minimize all those, and you're off to the races. Now, up the layers, I did say we'd be coming back to that. Before we do that, though, I do want to apply one filter to try to kind of clean up my map just a little bit. So I'm going to come in, and I'm going to apply a first production date of 1/1/2010. So now we're looking at 6,440 wells. I think what we'll see is all those old verticals are gone. And we can zoom out just a little bit here and get a bigger view of the Eagleford. You can see we took that one zoom level back. Our laterals are all gone now. And I tell you what, since we really want to focus on some of those, I am going to come up to my formation here, and I'm going to choose the Eagleford formation. So this is a nice way to look at this as well. These are one of our filter helpers, so to speak. And the reason we have these is because we don't expect you to start typing things and know exactly how they're spelled or how they're placed or anything like that. And so we give you the top options here based off of your current search values. So you can see obviously Eagleford is number 1. And if you start typing in here, if you just type Eagle and hit enter, then it's going to give you what options are there. And so it's a great way to allow you to find these filter values without knowing the exact terms at any given time. And so you can see some of the wells from inside of that area actually did go away because there are a number of them that are listed as Austin Chalk wells. And so I can zoom out even further, since now that we've had our filters down, and we should be able to get all of these wells in our view. So now is the perfect time for us to go and talk about these layers. And so again, bear with me because I'm going to jump around just a little bit because they kind of move from simple to more complex. And so to kind of jump over the first three and just run down the bottom, the rest of these layers here are for either your personal or third-party layers. So if you have KMLs or shape files, this is where you can upload them here to show them on the map. So that's quick and easy. Select your file, go to town. Keep one thing in mind with shape files. If you have a shapefile that has the SHP, the DBF, the projection file, and all those, zip those up, and we'll be able to utilize all of those properties and make sure that your shapefile is being placed right in the right datum and everything. If for any reason you don't have those files, if you just have an SHP, then we'll attempt to plot it for you anyway, which comes out really well for the most part. Just a little tip though. So if you look at these GeoJSON, Z maps, those are property maps. You can export those straight out of Petra and things like that. WMTS, TMS, and WMS are all mapping server URLs that you'll drop in. And so if you don't have an internal map server or anything to use, then those don't matter to you. But there are free open layers from Esri and other providers that you can go in and copy and paste those URLs in here and get things like topographical maps or other reference maps. And so there are some interesting things. If you ever are exploring map servers, you can drop in basically any URL into one of these three formats. So up to the top now, the kind of key ones we wanted to focus on. The first one is rigs. Now, this is a really simplistic option to see. You can see the current rigs here. You can give it a name if you want. You can also choose to show the rigs in the last 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days if you want to see a little bit broader activity. And then from a visualization standpoint, you'll notice some of the same things that we saw in our view with the laterals, labels, bottom hole and surface hole, as well as the color by items, and again, the visualizations. Bubbles, heat, grids, choropleths. And so offhand, doing the well spots, we can do a solid color if we want, just have them all black and hit load. And then we see all the rigs show up. So keep in mind the rigs that are showing here, our filters that we have don't apply to those rigs. And so they show everywhere. The other things you could do, if you wanted a little bit more broad, you could take those rigs and, let me go to our existing rig layer. And I'm going to edit that, and we can turn this into something like a choropleth or something like that, which will work. We can do a county, and we can do the sum of the county, of the well counts in every county. And so this will give us an outline of the county with the number of rigs in them. And so now we can see kind of the density of the rigs in my view. Now keep in mind that the scale here is all dynamic, meaning that you're seeing some red, blue, green. That is all based off of my view, which in the Eagle Ford is not going to be a ton of wells. Let's see if we can get down. So the blue is 2, the red is 17. So there are some rigs obviously working here, but still it's not like in, say, Lee County where you got 4 or 5 times that many. So I'm going to come back and flip that back to my well spots, and just all you got to do is click edit and flip that back over to well spots, go to solid color again. I'll use that kind of cyan looking color there. So there are all my spots there. Okay, now back open our layers one more time. And again, for the sake of jumping around like a crazy person, I'm going to go down to WDB overlays. Again, it's just increasing in complexity. WDB overlays are kind of built-in ones, overlays that you can use on our maps. And so you'll see things, states and counties, the land grids, that kind of thing. Under plays and basins, a lot of these are out of EIA files. And so you'll see, especially if you're in the Permian, it breaks down all the different boundaries, formations. And so like this one, we want the Eagle Ford boundary. And we'll go ahead and get the Eagle Ford ISO patch as well. And then just to kind of show you the rest of them, under miscellaneous, you can do things like gas processing plants, the offshore platforms, faults, those things. And then under pipelines, we do have the main transmission lines, but then we also have detailed pipelines with the gathering systems, specifically in Texas right now. Down beneath here, you can turn these, the layers you add, you can make them interactive, and you can edit their opacity to kind of show how dark or light they are, how transparent they are really. So I'm going to click load, and we're going to see those spots pop right in. And so now we'll open this back up, and we've got a couple boundaries we're working with. I'm actually going to come in and show you the data layers. Now, the data layers are a really neat feature. What they amount to is a set of filters of your wells in your visualization. So really, it's almost identical to those first steps we took about doing our well search and then identifying how we want to visualize it. The cool part about this is it allows us to kind of do multiple layers of visualizations. So I'm in my filters first. I'm going to come in and I am going to actually, let me go back here, and I'm going to use that geographic plays, and I'm going to use Eagleford here. And so now this is going to be showing me, be sure to click add filter, by the way. Now I'm going to be looking at all wells that fall in that boundary, which we conveniently added as a view there. And then I'm going to apply that. And then for visualizations, I'm going to actually choose to do a heat map. And when you heat map, you can do, I mean, there are, dozens, I think we actually over 100, nearly 200 properties you can select from. So the searching is super useful here. I'm going to do just a 20-year EUR BOE. So what that is, it's a 20-year timeline of production and or forecasting. And so the term EUR is probably not correct, but there's not a better term for it. So if a well is produced for over 20 years or more, it'll be actual production. If it has produced for less than 20 years, it'll be what the actual is plus forecasted up to that 20-year mark. So it's really beneficial for doing this apples and apples comparison for where the production is. And the radius on a heat map is a kind of funny one. It seems a little bit arbitrary, so it's one of those things you just have to play with. As you zoom out, a lot of times you want to kind of increase it, and as you zoom in, you want to decrease it. So I'm going to go ahead and just set it at 16 here. Again, a little arbitrary, and hit load. I'm sure I'll need to edit it once it loads up. Okay, one mistake I made on that data layer, well, two of them here. I'm going to rename it so I know what I'm looking at. Eagleford Heat. And then for filters wise, I left too many wells in my view. And so I'm going to come back here and I'm going to, under my event dates, I'm going to go ahead and put a first production date of 1/1/2010 as well. And that should limit my search a little bit more, which will allow us to be able to show the heat map in better light. And there we go. And so I can already tell that my radius is a little big because I'm just getting a lot of red. So I'm just going to come in and edit that again. And in here, just kind of tweak it down to, around 10. Okay, it's a little bit better here. One more thing to note is that Eagleford Heat is on the bottom of the list. And now all of these different layers have varying opacity. And so you can still see it, but if you want to see it above the other, say those other boundaries, then we can just click and drag these guys up, and now you see it's a little bit higher. I'm actually going to tweak my heat just a little bit lower on the radius so that we can get a better look of the real hot spots in the area. And so that's perfect. Now we can actually see some of the areas the known areas at a little bit higher BOE. And so I'm going to zoom in now so that we can just check this out in a little bit more detail. One cool trick is if I hold shift and drag my cursor, it'll make a box and it'll try to zoom to that box for me. And so I'm going to go in this hot spot here. Now, when we zoomed in, the radius shifted and it kind of changed our view here. So now we're getting a little bit disconnected in our heat map. So kind of do that same business again, where I come to the visualization, raise this back up to the 15 or so, and now we're seeing the kind of cluster activity that we're expecting here. Okay, now another great thing I want to do before we dive into the analytics, I'm going to play with a few more layers, but then I also want to simplify this map a little bit. Now I think it's not in bad shape already, but I'm going to come into our operators. And again, with that search helper, everything is listed by number of wells. And so if I want the top 5 operators by well count, then I simply need to select the top 5 here and hit add. And that should give me those top 5. And so now you can see my northern section is gone, and I'm kind of just in this middle here, which is kind of a shame. I probably should have left EOG in, but it's irrelevant. We're just kind of exploring here now. And so now I've got a heat map of 20-year production. I also have my wells. I have rig layers. I've got a few boundaries here set. I can go ahead, and this, again, gets a little bit messy, but I'm going to add, oops, I didn't mean an overlay. I meant to add a data layer here. So I can add another data layer, and what I would suggest doing if you have multiple visualizations you'd like to make is ensure that your visualizations are different on each one. So I'm going to do a grid map here, largely just to show you what a grid map looks like. And we are looking at 20-year already, so let's kind of contrast that with cumulative BOE. And so since it's a grid map, it is going to grid based off of a bin size that we select. And so I can do a 1 mile grid. I can do a as big as I want. So I'm going to do just I'm going to bring it down since I'm zoomed in to a 3 mile grid. And so what it's going to do is give me the average cum BOE on that 3 mile grid. Now, since we're doing a cumulative number, we can set filters if we want. I'm actually going to leave them off and just see what it looks like. Who knows? Okay, so now what we're seeing is that kind of, again, with the layering, it's a little bit hard to tell, so I keep not naming these. Let's name this one. This is the Eagle Ford cum BOE. Now, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to raise it up over the heat for now, just to see what it looks like. So in doing so, I kind of hid the heat, which is not cool. And so I can come in and play with that if I like. So I can change this opacity on this layer to around 50%. So I should see through it somewhat. And there we go. So now we can see the heat and the grid together. And so we're seeing the same heat area here is both responsible for the 20-year peaks as well as the cum peaks. This over here is a still a nice heat area, but the cum production does not add up to what it is over here. My guess, it's probably newer, but that's neither here nor there. It's all about kind of layering these ideas together to see what kind of insights you can glean from them. And so that's touched on most of our map tools. As you can see, there's a number of layers I can add, and there's kind of limitless to the maps I can create. Now, it will just get more and more busy, so be careful with that. And then should you come in and maybe you did make it too busy and you want to hide a layer, you don't have to delete it. You can actually just hide it here. And so that way you can flip back between things and not lose what you created, because that can be really, really painful. So if you were looking at my personal one, you'd see like 100 layers here and half of them are hidden at any given time. So anyway, great tools and really awesome for mapping and trying to identify things. One other quick note here. So what I accidentally just did, but I want to talk about, is this on this cum BOE. Since it's an interactive layer, if I click on the layer, and keep in mind I don't click on the well spot, but I click off in another area, then it'll tell me my cum BOE. It gives me the center of my grid spot and the number. And so this is telling me my average cum BOE in this spot is 719,000. Again, it's BOE. It's going to be a 6-to-1 on the standard map BOEs. And so if you wanted to, you can click on these various areas. You can get ideas of what's happening here. And you can also create an AOI from this. And so if you see something interesting in that grid and you really want to dive into it, then create an AOI of it. And what you'll see is that it has blocked out that one AOI. So only the wells that either have a surface or a bottom hole inside that grid now appear. So now I say I have 76 wells. I can see what each production for each of those wells looks like. And then I can start analyzing this deeper if I want. Additionally, before we leave off of the map section and dive into analytics, when you click on any of these well spots, and actually this is something another thing to say, that should you come into an area and you don't want those pop-ups, then all you need to do is come in and uncheck the interactive button there, and then now you'll be able to click on anything around in the spots, and it won't bring up that window anymore. And so if I click on one of these wells, you'll see I can choose to watch a well, which will then email me if anything happens on this well. But I can go into the well details here. And this is a really great thing to go over. It's obviously a pretty big deal within our platform. So kind of just moving down the list or moving down the page, you can choose the map if you want to isolate this one well. It'll just drop you in a map of just this well. I can export the data for this well. I can generate a single well report like a scout ticket or a well detailed report. I can watch this well. I can add it to a project, or if I see a bit of bad data, I can flag this and we can review it and ensure that our data is staying up to date and fixing any issues that you might find. And then a quick overview. We had a map, a little bit of a description of what's going on as well, the producing dates, CUMs and EURs and things like that. Kind of moving down under general, this is our basic information. So I was going to note that the CUM and the EUR are the same because this well is currently shut in. But again, you'll see who's operating it, the basins, formations, the different dates, locations, depths, and those kind of things in here. The production will give you a month-to-month production data for this well. From here, if you want to, you can do things like create a decline curve and create multiple economic scenarios. And just to sidebar on that, let's go ahead and try it just for the oil real quick to show you how easy this is. And so first thing you do is you highlight the area you want to use for your decline curve. And so we'll do this. Then under oil, I hit add decline. And so it'll allow me to pick and select all the options. If I want to define the decline type, I can pick it. If I just leave the options by default and use the best fit, you'll see it's going to come out very nicely. And so if I hit generate here, we see that we're looking at a hyperbolic 0.9. Here's the stream. Now, we know this well got shut in along the way, so this is probably a bad example, but at the same time, this is, should we have been back in 2015, we would have thought the world of this well. But again, EURs, recovered remaining. And then the what you can do here, which is kind of cool, it shows a hyperbolic with no terminal decline. A lot of times you want to see what those look like, so all you have to do is click the copy button, and it'll copy the settings over into a new version. And then if I do a modified hyperbolic and specify my decline percent, so say a 15% terminal decline, then I'll hit generate, and then we can see we hit a terminal on 10/20/20, so about 8 years in. You can see where the terminal hits and it starts to decline. But then you can see the net difference in the EUR is only 279,000 versus 244,000 barrels, so about a 35,000 barrel difference. And you might see that and say, well, that's steep. Let's try another one, and we'll do it at 10% and generate that. So now we have 3 different options up here at once with the 10%, a 15%, and no terminal decline. And we can compare each one of these options as well. And so it's really cool to be able to quickly and easily identify kind of a broad basic overview of a DCA there. And as you zoom down and scroll down, you'll see here's the table with all of those monthly values, the heading for each decline type, and you can export this data out as well, which will give you the monthly records. So again, as a very quick overview, it's a really powerful tool to be able to decline these things very quickly like that. Okay, moving down, we're not looking at injection or disposal well, so we won't have anything in there. If there are environmental incidents, we'll look at them there. The rigs, permits, completions, you can see when all the activity happened on this well, when it happened, what the frac information was, the ingredients involved in it, any casing and tubing and packer, perforations, directional surveys, formation data. So basically, if you name it, we have a field for it here. Jumping down to the bottom, this is what I touched on before with our custom data. You can see my completion type here. I have no value set here, rightly so, because I don't know what it is. But if I want to say set this as a sliding sleeve and save it, now it will show up in my search when I look for it. One other cool thing down at the bottom, you'll find all of the filings from different state agencies are here. So everything from directional surveys, test data, plats, the permit files, everything is all in one place. And so if you ever want to take our data and kind of look and see what it looks like against the against the actual state filings, you can do that here. And so if I show you here, you can choose to download one of these files or just open it. And if you open it, it will open directly in one of our viewers. We have viewers for TIFFs, PDFs, or images, or LAS files actually as well. And then you can see the details of that file. So this is the directional survey, all the information on it as filed from the operator, the plats, locations. Again, just really nice to have it all in one place. No bouncing around to frac focus, and then in this case, it would be NEBUS in Texas, and in the permit search and the completion search and the production search, you basically have everything in one place. So that's the well detail. It's really important, obviously, for any single well item. But again, kind of moving in, the beauty of all of this is when we can combine it together and get into some of our higher level analytics. So I'm going to remove this custom AOI that we used whenever we applied that as a filter. And I'm going to back up a little bit and get us back to at least somewhat of that view we were in. Now, over here on the analytics side, this entire time we've been updating our number of wells, but it's also been updating our average TDs, TVDs, lateral lengths, elevations, dates, cum production numbers, and things like that. And it also gives us a well level production view. And so I think this will cap out on the pro account at about 500 wells. Again, super messy here, but outliers are easy to pick up. So you can dive in and see what are my top producers and things like that. So again, kind of useful there. And then you can see here the permit activity over time. Of course, heavy permitting in the early 2010s and slowed down since then. And then we have a histogram where you can throw in items as well. Coming across now, this is where we get into some interesting things. Our dashboards will allow you to start doing some high-level analytical work. And so kind of working our way down, we have rigs and permits. These two are very straightforward in that, a permit doesn't have a ton of information on it. And it's just going to basically show me, I'll break this down by current operator. And it's going to show me the permitting activity of each operator over time. That's really about the gist of what you can see here, which again is nice. You can see the whole activity. You can see each operator's kind of piece of that activity as well. You can look at it from the pie chart, and as you look at these wells, you'll see they are interacting with the view. So as I go from operator to operator, it shows me where those wells are on the map as well. And you have a few options here. We can show a pie by default, but you can show a bar column or tree map. I've actually become pretty fond of the tree map look, especially when you have more groups to work with. And then down beneath here, we're looking at permit counts. You can do things like line charts, area charts, percent charts. I'm a big fan of the columns stacked here, and so I just kind of leave it at that. And then down at the bottom, you have this pivot grid. And so right now it's just by basin. This is all in the Gulf Coast. And so we do have it operator by basin, but I can come in here, flip this over to something like in the permit fields, you'll see we have a permit purpose, permit status, and target formation. So if I hit permit purpose, then we can see by operator what the purpose of each of the permits in our view are. So we have field transfers, new drills, reclassifications, and recompletions here. So again, just another way of kind of helping break down the data. When I look at all this permit activity, I can see that the vast majority are new drills, but when I see this 86 field transfers from Devon, I can start diving into those and see what's going on. Bad example probably because I don't really care about those field transfers, but still some basic information there. If I go down to rigs, you'll see something pretty similar. Again, this is a historical rig view. And so if I want to do something like, again, current operator, then I can see the rigs of each operator over time. And so we can see, again, kind of like with the permits where you can see the stack and see what each operator, how many rigs they were running at any given time in this area. And then that same kind of pivot chart down here. So the same options will be here as they were in the permits. And so those two are similar. And the key is that they're event-based dashboards, and they don't really have a lot of numerical properties that we can chart on those. If I come up to the top now and drop down rigs and go to completions, then we have just a slight difference. And so again, I'm going to go group by the current operator so that I can see here. Note that you can group by the completion operator. And that's pretty interesting because the current operator is obviously who owns and operates the wells right this minute. But if you go to a completion operator, then we'll be able to see who was the operator that actually did the completion work. And so, of course, this is a good one, Pioneer. I do believe those are ones that Ensign bought. And so you can see when we're studying the completions of these wells and trying to understand what completion techniques were being used by which operators, it's much better to use the actual operator who did the completion rather than the operator who operates the well today. So again, nice feature to be able to do that. I'm going to flip it back over to current operator so I can get some cleaner charts, really, is all I'm doing here. And so you'll see we have a new chart over here. This is showing us the average IPs for each operator. And so there are a few numerical values that we get from a completion, like IPs, the perfs, upper and lower, and some depth information. And so if you want to see kind of the details of those completion specific fields, you can. We're looking at the sum of IPs. And so if I want to go back again to look at the average IPs, and we're in a line chart, which when it's so choppy, I don't care for that. So I'm going to go to a column chart. And then that'll help me kind of compare all the operators and see their IPs, their average IPs over time, to kind of look at an idea of how well their completions have trended, if they've improved or whatever here. You'll notice a number of tools down here. So I can do over time or cum. I can aggregate these things in a number of ways using percentiles, min-maxes, averages, and counts. Those same properties we saw above, IPs, depths, things like that, are all here. Monthly and cum, log plots, and then obviously the chart types. And down beneath here, we have that same grid. But again, just like in permits, we get a few different things. So like completion purpose or completion type are here. I'm taking I figured that was going to happen. I was taking a gamble. We may not have those properties in this area. And so you'll see that for completions. You'll see some very similar information for stimulations, test data. I don't want to belabor the point and dive through each property available in every one, but you'll see some of the same information, same kind of properties where you can dive into and say, I want to look at the proppant mass by operator, the average proppant over time, and I can see what that looks like. So again, stimulations, test data will look like that. Production data, this was kind of our bread and butter for a long time, and it looks like I was playing with this earlier. We've got a ton of fields in this particular group by. Right now I have it by the frac company, and so I can see Halliburton fracs versus Schlumberger fracs in this area. So again, if you're trying to dive into service companies and understanding dynamics there, you can do it. But kind of sticking with our initial pass of using the current operators, we'll pop that up and we can see those 5 operators. Now, again, we've got our pie charts, and then we're looking at the sum of oil here. You can do oil, gas, water, BOE, either 6 or 20 here. From the production chart, and this is super useful here, we can see the total production over time. We can flip this over to a type curve, which sets everything on a month 1 basis, and so you can see where kind of the decline of each operator, this is actually a really clean look. We can see Burlington kind of top and kind of work our way down to Repsol down at the bottom here. We can do those same kind of percentiles if we want to see P10, P50, P90, or looking at the sums, the overall sums, we can do that. We can be looking at oil on a month or daily for oil, gas, and water, and then BOEs for month and daily, and a GOR down at the bottom. We can also normalize. This is the first one we can normalize. So if you want to normalize production by something like 1,000 lateral feet, we can do that and see how these don't change that much, but it does change somewhat. Rate and cum charts, log plots, and then of course those same options here for the visualization. So again, lots of options here to kind of diagnose and dive into each production, each operator's or each group's production. Like I said, we're grouped by operator, but as you do this in different kind of ways, it's going to kind of come to different results. And then kind of going down, a lot of the same permits over time is what we're looking at here. I can look at production or completion, spuds, simulations over time. So again, another activity chart with a stacked column to kind of show the overall activity and each operator's activity within that time. Histogram, which again, tons of options, just like what we looked at whenever we were choosing it in the mapping grid. So if I want to see the distribution of 20-year EUR here on a BOE, then I can see what that looks like. You can see I got a couple from the Burlington and Devon way up high, but our bulk of ours are hanging out in this, what is that, 500,000 to 1 million BOE on a 20-year scale. And then down beneath here, it's a little bit different. You have a couple different features here. These in production you can check any one of these if you want. Say you just wanted to look at these 3 for now, then you can choose to just map these 3. And what you'll see over here on the filters is that those 3 are now applied. And so we can see just these 3 operators. If I want to dive into just one of these, so if I just want to look at Devon, I can actually go on this row, click the globe, and it's going to give me just Devon here. And again, works kind of similarly. I'm actually going to come in and I'm going to add those guys back. Now, if I click on the filter icon, though, this will give me a chance to dive into Devon specifically without changing my map view. And so I can look at all of those same analytics we were looking at before, every single one just for Devon's wells in my area. And so this allows me to start looking and diving into a specific group without losing where I was in the past. And so I can see monthly production for them. I can see a type curve here. I can take this and draw my decline here as well, that same decline tool we used earlier, generate this, and now I can see the hyperbolic 0.6 is the average decline for Devon in my search area. So again, super quick and easy way to dive in, and if I just close it out, I'm right back to where I left off. So it's another great feature that you can do here. Of course, I'd be remiss to not note you can export out any of these as well, and you can come here to this grid and you can specify, by default we have cum, gas, oil, and water. If you want to add another column, you can. And we can drop in IP oil, hit OK, and we should be able to see those average IPs anyway. They're not in there right now. The other thing I did kind of skim over, but every single one of these charts, there's a menu button. And up here, I can come in and toggle a legend. I can download an image. So if I want to get a JPEG or PNG to drop into a PowerPoint, I can do that here. And then I can download the data via CSV or Excel, and that'll be the grouped data. And so it'll give me, in this case, it would be the operator, month number, and production. And so again, if you are taking this into, say you've got a spreadsheet where you do some decline curve analysis on that you have some additional fields you want, then you can come in and grab this group production and take it out. Or if you wanted the individual well production, if you remember that overview over here had individual well production. And so all those same toggles down at the bottom so that I can come in here, and if I want to grab all of these wells, I can turn them into a type well and export out this data. And this is something that I've known a few users who had their spreadsheets and they just wanted to be able to copy and paste production data based on a month number. And so they just came in here, set this as month number, hit export to Excel, and they were off to the races. So it was super quick and easy for those fellows. And so injection and disposition will be similar to production data. Those are going to be volumes, pressures, and things like that over time. Where we're at, we're not going to find a lot of those, so no real reason to mess with that. But the last thing we show on this particular page is going to be our dashboards. And that's me playing with the dashboard there. I'm going to pick the operator comparison one. And so this is just expands a little bit deeper on some of the things we've already looked at. But it'll show me I've got nearly 2,000 wells, an average lateral of 5,800, my average proppant, GORs, CUMs, 12 months. I can see the distribution of lateral lengths of proppants, choke ranges, the proppant loading per thousand. So yeah, pounds per thousand feet. I'm looking at oil type curves, oil cum curves, the B values over time, And so it kind of goes on and on and on. This is one of our built-in dashboards that anyone can access. There's a number of them. A PDP overview is another one where you can see the oil production to date and a 30-year GOR, and you can see kind of the total production and then the PDP, the decline, the forecast here. So this is generated by our back-end decline system that every time we get new production data for a well, we run a decline curve analysis over each well, and we forecast it out 20 years into the future, and then you're just looking at an aggregate of all that information here. So a number of these dashboards are built in, but you can also just create a new one. So if I just want to create a dashboard, I can do this, name it a demo dashboard. If I'm going to call this one a production category, so it'll kind of just sort them in my list. I can give it a description. I won't bother now, but I can choose a template, which will let me start with one of my existing ones. So if you just want to start tweaking something that's already there, it could get you started, get you a good head start. I'm going to use a blank one just because it doesn't matter, and I'll create this one. And you'll see now we can start adding widgets. Now, again, I don't want to sit here and touch on every single widget you can do, but creating your own dashboard here is pretty powerful. So just running them down, production charts will give you all of those production options that we looked at. So type curves, monthly curves, cum, groups, normalizations, all of those will be here. So if you want that oil production chart on here, you can do that. A time series chart is going to be more event-based, so if I want to see well counts or permit data over time, completions over time, and those kind of things, I can do those. KPIs, those were those boxes up top where it gave me a number, a numeric value, and then I can give it a header and a footer, and I give it a color range to color it if I have a certain numbers that interest me there. And then kind of coming down are a little bit more simple: a bar chart, column, line, area scatter, bubble, box plot, tree map, and external page. So if I have a URL I want to drop in, I can do that here. The box plot, by the way, is that one that we looked at that showed the distribution of proppant and lateral lengths, where it shows a box around the averages and then draws a line to the extremes, the mins and maxes. So adding one is as simple as selecting that as a KPI, for example. I can give it a title, test KPI. I can do average cum BOE. I can normalize that by lateral length, by 1,000 feet. I can give it a prefix. And I can just show you what these look like. Specify, I'm just going to choose 0 decimals, and I can colorize it, meaning that a low value might be, what did we use again? A cum BOE. So I'm going to say a low value is going to be under 500,000, and a high value is going to be over 1 million. And then hit apply, and there we go. We have the suffix, it says test KPI, and we're at 84,000. Which puts me under the high value and between the low value. So anyway, you can see how easy that is. If you want to tweak this, just hit edit, and you can come in and do things like adding spaces around here. We can set this down to more like 200,000 and a high value of 50,000. Sorry, not 50,000. It was 84, so yeah, I wanted 20,000 and 50,000. Sorry about that. Hit apply. Now it's green because we've now gone over our limit. And then if you want to, you can resize these any which way, grow them, and then add new widgets, do a production chart. We'll do just the default oil by operator, hit go, and it'll give us that same operator chart that we were looking at. So again, if we want to tweak this, we can shrink this down here just a little bit. Oops, wrong thing there. There we shrink it, and now I can drag it over and make a really ugly dashboard. So anyway, you get the point that we can do. It's fully customizable, and you can dive in. One other cool thing that I like to do under custom chart, because people have variations of what they like, but I actually like designing charts here. So I might come in here for my y-axis, lateral length. So keep in mind a custom chart, kind of skimmed over that. It allows you to specify your X, your Y, any sizing by options and those kind of things. And so I'm looking at lateral length. This is actually lateral length by proppant mass. And so if I like this chart, then I can come in here and I can say I want to add this to a dashboard. I could add this to our new demo dashboard. And it can show up there. So anyway, this is here though, and if you want to dive into this, the options are almost limitless, as you can pick your types, put regression lines, choose what you want for your x-axis, for your y-axis, normalizations, aggregations, and then size by if you need a third kind of dimension to your chart. And so if you're doing a one-off, this is a great way to create a quick chart. If you want to then if you create something you like, then you can easily add it to one of your dashboards and keep going that way. The last couple things to show you up top, we have a monthly type curve in economics. The economics is the pure pro level. We'll just skim over that. Monthly production data will, both of these charts will apply to all of the wells in our current search, and so you'll see the well counts, production data. You can look at the table to see what the particular numbers are at any given month, and you can expand each of those months to see what wells were involved in that production and then how much they produced during that month. And then you can click on the names to open up the details if you want to dive into one that maybe jumps out to you as a high producer. The same thing can be done over in the type curve, where you can come in and do those same decline curves that we did earlier. And then you can also add custom series here where you can do things where I want oil, gas, and water. I can look at any of those P values, the percentiles and the P10, P50, 90, those kind of things. I can do daily or monthly colors, and I can do different line styles. And so this is something that's useful if you want to see daily production, or if you want to look at a P50, a P90, a P10 all on one chart. You can do that here. And then again, that same thing, whenever you're looking at these, you can expand these and see which wells were involved in that production over that period of time. Of course, in the second month, it's almost all wells, but as you get down to lower months, you might be more interested in seeing what those wells are. The last thing is the economics tab. And again, this is a pro level feature, so I don't want to sit there and necessarily go over this too much in detail. But this is a really neat tool that you can come through and just in a matter of seconds, I can come in and select a period of time, hit recalculate. It's going to calculate all three streams fit for a decline curve. It's going to tell me based off of the revenue and expense numbers that I put in here, what's recovered, what's remaining, what's the total value of the average well in this system. And as you can see, it took 2 seconds to create, and you can tweak each of the individual streams, all the revenue and the expenses, look at totals, get a quick cash flow look. And so this is pretty interesting. You can see when it goes net positive and then when the monthly cash flow starts to decline. Again, that is a pro level feature and something that we will cover in more detail in a later webinar. But the last big thing I really want to kick off is coming into the list where we can create exports. And this is a massively used feature in our platform. And so it's really important to touch on this. So I can select wells if I want to export a handful of wells, or if I want to export my entire list, I can just click export all. And when I click export all, it's going to open up our data wizard or export wizard. And what you can do here is you can start, if you've already done this before, then you can have templates saved, and you can come in and pick your template, and that saves you a ton of time. So you only have to do these steps I'm about to show you one time. But if I'm doing a new one, I just choose new. And so now I can pick my file type. And so the CSV shapefile and Excel file, they will allow us to pick all the fields. The other ones are preset values, and so you don't get to pick and choose the fields that come in to those exports, as they're already predefined by the export themselves. And so those are pretty straightforward. If you pick a combo curve export and hit go, it's just going to export you out the CSV for the header and the production that goes right in the combo curve. So if I come in and I want to do more of a custom export, like the Excel XLSX single workbook, which is cool, it'll give me a tab for every data type I want to export, then I'll do that and hit next. And the first step is going to be, which data types do you want to export? And these kind of coincide with the well detail tabs that we had. So I can get headers out. If I want casings, completion days, directional surveys, all of those are here. For the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to do well headers, and I'm going to do production data. Keep in mind, you can do production data, forecast data. You can do summaries so that you can get roll-ups of that data instead of the actual monthly production data. And so take your time and look through these, and you might find that there's optimal fields that you want in some of these different types. So if I go ahead and pick production, so this is just headers and production. When I click next, it's going to say from the well headers, what do you want? And I can come through here picking each field that I want and adding them one by one to fully customize it. Or if I'm just being lazy or I want them all, I just click add all and hit next. And now it's going to ask me for the same for the production. Keep in mind, we're building what could be a template. And so taking our time to do this once to really fit our goals will help ensure that in the future, this will go really fast and speed up all of our processes. For this purpose as well, I'm just going to click add all on the production, hit next. I'm gonna give it a name, so I'm just gonna call this headers and production, and then I can save it. So this is where I save it, and you want to check this box if you want this to be one of your templates. And when I hit finish, it submits it to a backend system. We do this so that you can keep on using WellDatabase. You don't have to worry about anything else, and then it'll pop up here and let us know when that export is ready. Additionally, if I come into my exports, I can view all of my current exports and see the status. And if I go to my files, I can view all of my historical exports as well and download them at any time. The last thing here that I want to show you in a similar way that I exported where I can select wells, I can do that added to project as well. And so instead of adding ones, I'm just going to go ahead and show you a project that's already set up. So I go to my projects and I have an Eagleford project that I've been playing with. And so what you can see here is a project has a general where you can see the activity of what's going on. There's a discussion board where you and any users you invite can have conversations and you can reply and talk about things. And down at the bottom on the admins where you can add users, you can email anybody and invite them to a project. If they have a WellDatabase account, of course, they'll have all the features of WellDatabase, but you can actually add users to projects who don't have WellDatabase accounts, and they'll get a little bit of a read-only view here. But kind of coming down, you have the wells. Those wells that you attach will be listed here. You can click on any one of them, and it'll open up the well detail for that well. I can also attach searches, and so if I'm attaching offset searches, target wells, this is an offset well information, and so you can kind of see that it'll run these every night, tell you what the change is. And so if you're looking for wells to be, potentially permitted in your area, then this is a great way to kind of create a setup, a search, and then it'll tell you when those numbers change. And then files underneath here, I can attach files to any of my wells. So if I have drilling reports or any kind of AFE information that I want to attach to a well here, I can do that. I can also create project level files so that if I want to upload maps or anything like that, I can do that here. And then the last quick tool here is this is going to be the production charts, the same monthly and type that we've seen a couple times now, but they are applied to the wells in my project. And so that means I'm getting that production data for all of those wells. And so if I'm just looking at these, I can do a simple type curve for these wells. I can come and drop these best fit. All these same tools are here, and you can see that. And so that touches on just about everything. Now, there are a lot of nuances, a lot of different places with a lot more detail that we could dive into. But again, in order to get the overview and to be able to do this in some normal amount of time, we just kind of left it at that level. If you are interested in learning more about certain details about WellDatabase or any other features that you want to turn on, then by all means give us a call or an email or contact us on the chat on our site. We'll be happy to help you out in whether that's using particular parts of the site to getting you set up with an enterprise plan to data feeds, APIs. There's a number of different features that we offer that kind of fall outside the scope of this webinar. Additionally, if you have questions that we didn't get to, by all means shoot us that email or talk to us. And if there's a question out there that we didn't get to answer, don't worry, we'll get back with you. And so I wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to check this out, and hopefully we'll see you on WellDatabase. Have a great day.